But with all due courtesy to our guest speaker, Mike has graced us with his presence today and has to leave for another event. And as you know, politicians have busy lives, as we all do, but tend to book themselves up when they come to a community, and we understand and respect that, and we're so pleased that Mike is here. So I want to introduce Mike Schreiner, the leader of the Ontario Green Party. I had the privilege of meeting Mike when I was invited to his, I think, his inaugural convention and party meeting back in 2009, I believe. Wow, has it been that long? Wow, and Mike is a fresh voice for the party and to Canadian politics and to Ontario politics. My meetings with him are always convivial and interesting, but he's a passionate believer in sustainable transportation and the environment in our economy. He's intelligent, he brings a perspective in terms of food security and food safety from his background, but he's a community development guy. He's someone who believes in financial responsibility and economic prosperity. And lest I give his entire speech, I want to introduce him and welcome him to our discussion today. Mike Schreiner. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks so much for that kind introduction. And I told Eleanor that, you know, one of the great things about the night I was elected leader in November of 2009 was that the very first NGO leader I met with the next morning was Eleanor. So that was quite a privilege and quite an honor. I'm going to be relatively brief today because I don't want to disrupt your lunch too much. And I want to thank you, Eleanor, for giving me this opportunity to make an important policy announcement. But before I do that, I want to acknowledge two people in the room, and I also want to acknowledge the work you're doing. So I just want to point out, if I could, that there are two Green Party nominees running to represent Guelph in the next provincial election who are here today, Steve Dick and Mike Salisbury. If I could just introduce the two of you really quick. And the nomination meeting is coming up soon, so please introduce yourself to them. I want to thank everyone in this room for being at the forefront of tackling three major challenges that I think are facing our generation and that we have to address. And I think that the people in the active transportation sector are at the forefront of addressing. The first one is a global phenomenon of rising world energy prices and the effects that's having on our society and our communities and our economy. And let's just acknowledge a few things. First of all, gridlock in the greater Golden Horseshoe costs our economy $3.3 billion a year in lost productivity. Let's acknowledge the fact that it takes important time away from our family, our friends, and our volunteer activities to spend hours every day commuting. Let's acknowledge the fact that one of the major challenges we're going to face coming out of this recession is how do we build more diverse, resilient local economies. And I think having livable, sustainable communities that have active transportation are going to be critical to addressing those issues. The second major challenge facing us in this generation that you're tackling is the issue of climate change. Transportation represents over 25% of Ontario's greenhouse gas emissions, and it's the largest sector when it comes to greenhouse gas emissions. And we can't address that without active transportation. And the third area, and maybe the most important one perhaps, is the sustainability of our publicly funded healthcare system and the critically important role you're playing in addressing that issue. Healthcare costs currently represent 46% of the provincial budget, and if things don't change, by 2030, healthcare will represent 80% of the province's budget, crowding out important public services such as education, social welfare, and a host of other things that the provincial government supports. I don't think we can address that issue unless we start taking illness prevention and health promotion seriously. And the reality is that the lack of activity, our inactive lifestyles are contributing to an obesity epidemic, a diabetes epidemic, heart disease, and a whole host of other preventable illnesses that's putting tremendous pressure on our healthcare system. And it's my opinion that if we invest a penny in preventing illness today, we're going to save $1 in treating illness tomorrow. And active transportation is critically important to addressing that issue. So on Wednesday of this week, the Green Party of Ontario launched our provincial platform. And one of the important issues that we put forward is a policy plank that says we believe in building efficient, livable communities. And that's part of our vision to build a financially, socially, and environmentally sustainable Ontario for ourselves, our children, and future generations. And that policy is an important component of our economic policy, our energy policy, and our healthcare policy. And so for all those reasons, I think it's absolutely essential for the provincial government to partner with all of you and to partner with our municipalities to ensure that we have the planning mechanisms, the policy mechanisms, and the infrastructure in place to support active transportation. So I'm pleased to announce today that even in this tough fiscal climate, when the province is facing a $16.7 billion deficit that we have to tackle, we still have to put money into active transportation. And it's an issue of priorities, it's an issue of vision, it's an issue of what are the practical, sensible, long-term solutions and the choices we're going to make. So today I want to say that the Green Party is going to advocate that the $200 million that are currently slated for investment and expansion of 400 series highways in this province, we want to cancel that, and we want to transfer those dollars into providing an investment fund for municipalities to support active and alternative transportation in our communities. And as part of that, there's going to be two critical important components, urban and rural. So we see active transportation to be essentially important to our rural cycling strategy. We need paved shoulders to make sure that it's safe for cyclists in rural communities across this province to not only cycle for day-to-day transportation, but also for recreation. And as our good friends from Niagara in their presentation pointed out, it's essential to our local economies in rural Ontario to ensure that cycling is completely integrated with tourism as a driver of local economic development in rural communities. And we're going to ensure that funds are in place for those communities to invest in active transportation. The second component is an urban cycling strategy, centered around having funds in place to bring complete streets to Ontario. We're firm believers that our urban communities need to have streets that are safe for all users, pedestrians, cyclists, drivers, transit users, delivery vehicle folks. Everyone needs to ensure that we have the infrastructure in place to support them. And I want to conclude today by saying, I used to run a local food distribution business. And as part of that business, I drove a delivery van in Toronto every day. And at the same time, I'm an avid cyclist. And so I commute by bike everywhere I can go. And I fundamentally believe that every delivery van driver in this province should have to cycle in Toronto. And every cyclist in Toronto should have to be a delivery van driver, so we can all understand the challenges that we both face and the absolute critical importance it is for us to have complete streets so they're safe for delivery van drivers and for cyclists. So thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for providing the vision that you're providing to Ontario, to being on the forefront of change and to tackling some of the most important issues that we face in the 21st century. Thank you.